Hey guys, what's up? I'm Greg, he's Q, and today we're here for our Better Call Saul review and react of Season 2, Episode 10, Klick. That's Klick with a K. I will just get started right off the bat and say, last week's episode, better than this week's episode.
Oh yeah.
Now, we open with a flashback of Jimmy and Chuck at their mother's bedside as she lay dying. Not much to go on here. Jimmy gets up to go get a sandwich, and while he's gone, their mother's dying words are to ask where Jimmy is. Jimmy comes back with the sandwiches. Jimmy asks Chuck if their mother had anything to say at the end. Chuck says no, of course, leaving Jimmy never knowing that she died asking for him. There is a brief tie back here in Episode 10 of last year's Season 1, Marco. Marco makes mention of the fact that Jimmy was in town for his mother dying and that he didn't come to see Marco. So this is during that time period. For all you Easter egg fans out there, because there was nothing tying this episode to Breaking Bad in any way, other of course than Mike and Jimmy. Now we're back in real time. Jimmy is shown across the street watching Chuck lying on the floor, possibly dying. He gets tired of waiting on Ernesto to get off his ass and calls somebody, runs in next door, turns off the lights, calls an ambulance, and sets everything up. Next we see Chuck being rolled through the hospital, being tortured with assorted electronic devices, flashlights put in his eyes. He's going to be hooked to an EKG machine. He is not happy at all. Which, you know, by and large, Chuck deserves.
Definitely.
Just saying, they should have extended that torture scene a little bit longer. Once Chuck is in his room and regains consciousness, Jimmy goes in to visit. Chuck just starts ranting and raving at him about how he had caught him and how he knew it all along. At this point, he tells Jimmy to bring Ernesto in. And out of the blue, inexplicably, Ernesto covers his ass. Because Jimmy and Ernesto go back to the mailroom together. And we're reminded of the flashback where Ernesto once helped Jimmy move. So we know that they do have some kind of friendship, as weird as it is. We now go to a brief shot of the ice cream truck driver in the back of a van being taken out into the desert, possibly to be tortured. We see Mike is following the van. And then we're right back to more Chuck. Chuck is trying to talk his way out of a CAT scan to his doctor, which is the same doctor that treated him back in Season 1 when he got tasered. And once again, I would like to see Chuck get tasered one more time. While sitting in the waiting room with Kim, on the TV over her shoulder, we see Diagnosis Murder, which indicates to us that Jimmy's commercial is coming up soon. And indeed, it was the Give Me Jimmy commercial, where they pieced together the spot with him standing in front of the flag that he took at the playground, the shot of him with the old man that was at the Air Force Base, and several other shots that you've seen him getting in the last few episodes. At this point, we flash back to Chuck, who is in a self-induced coma.
Oh, self-induced catatonia, I think.
Yeah. Which is a coma-like state, which, regretfully for all of us, he didn't stay there. As you can see by my passive-aggressive comments towards Chuck, we're building to a point in the episode where we want to kick Chuck in the face. Next, we move to Mike and Lawson in the desert trying out the M40 for distance sniper shooting, if you will. This is the same gun that Mike had looked at previously and had decided not to get. I guess he's getting it at this time. We see an establishing shot of time-lapse photography showing time go by. Then we see Chuck wake up with Jimmy at his bedside. Chuck immediately asks for water, and he's right back to being a horse's ass. During all of this, Jimmy did have the chance to commit Chuck, but he did not. He passed on it. He took temporary control of Chuck, but once he got Chuck home, from what I understood, that was temporary and Chuck was back in charge. Chuck asked to be left alone at his home, and as soon as Jimmy leaves, we see Chuck's up to something. He goes out to his garage and starts digging in a box. We now get to what I consider the most interesting thing in the entire episode. We're back to Mike. He is laying on the rocks in the desert watching a shed. He had followed the van in. He's waiting with his gun, wanting to get a shot at Hector. He sees the cousins. He sees the ice cream truck. He sees the odd henchman that appears once in a while. He sees the ice cream man drug out to his open grave and shot in the head. But the only shot he has at Hector, strangely enough, Nacho always seems to be standing in the way. Now, when you and I were watching this, I said to you, is Nacho doing this on purpose? At certain times it sure looked like he was looking right into the lens of the sight. The only reason I had any hesitation on was he doing this or did he know is Nacho must have known the best place for him to be a sniper from, because what if Mike was behind him? Then he would have been standing on the wrong side. There's an answer to that, I believe, here in just a moment. Mike never gets a clear shot. The other thing is Nacho's putting enough faith that Mike won't shoot him for some reason into blocking the shot.
Well, Nacho knows they didn't shoot the ice cream driver when he robbed it, so...
That's true. It's just a weird dynamic between him and Nacho that they seem to have some kind of a trust in each other. And Nacho seems to be taking a lot more from Mike than he would anyone else. Like, if anyone else would have robbed that ice cream truck driver, Nacho would have probably just tried to kill him. And at this point, like, Nacho knew he was there to the point that we find out he was stepping in front of him on purpose because he left a note on Mike's car telling him, don't. Had a stick jammed into his horn, which was highly annoying. So, I don't know what I understand that they have something going. It seems like Nacho is a lot more accepting of crap from Mike than he is anyone else. And vice versa. I really think that Mike is giving Nacho a little bit extra room where someone else, he would have probably just shot through them. If the henchman would have been standing in front of Hector, it would be a dead henchman and a dead Hector. So that is the end of Mike for this season. We'll see Mike again next season. My only worry with this show, especially when it comes to Mike, is Jonathan Banks isn't getting any younger. And I don't want to jinx him, but I would hate for anything to happen to him health-wise, or God forbid he dies, and then we just never finish. Because you can't really recast Mike.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
I think he'll be fine.
So let's all say a little prayer that Jonathan Banks continues in his perfect health.
Yes, send all your positive energy to Jonathan Banks.
Okay, now we go back to Jimmy in his dentist office. He has a full waiting room thanks to his diagnosis murder commercial. It is all elderly people. Things look like they're finally turning around for Jimmy, of course. So now you know something's got to happen. Kim comes out and tells him that Howard has called. It's a mystery call. Jimmy calls Howard back. Once again, this is all a big mystery. Howard is blaming Jimmy for something. Next thing you know, he shows up at Chuck's house pounding on the door. And Chuck is in full-on crazy mode, tinfoiling the house.
A tinfoil wonderland.
Now, I watched this in a room with you and the guy on the couch, and I think we all kind of saw, by the time this was all said and done, that Chuck was playing Jimmy, because Chuck's an asshole. He basically pulled out this long con to make Jimmy confess, and Jimmy gave a full confession on tape. What Chuck had been rummaging around for earlier in the episode in that box was a recorder. I would say by the time the reveal came of the recorder, 95% of the people knew that bastard Chuck had to be recording this somehow. Having said all of that, that ends the episode and the season. Now, it was either you or the guy on the couch that expressed that this could lead into him being Saul Goodman. My understanding is if you lose your license to practice law, you can't just go change your name and practice law. Believe it or not, I've fallen down this rabbit hole of O.J. Simpson lately, and so I've been reading and watching a lot of stuff about the law. That recording was taken like unsolicited, and in the recording 2 different times he says, "I'm saying this to make you feel better." So if this was put before a judge or before a jury, and I'm sure it wouldn't go before a jury on like a licensing thing, Jimmy has the parachute of saying, "I was only saying this to pull him out of depression. I have documentation where they wanted me to put him away." So I think that's an option for him to get out of this. I think maybe, just maybe, Chuck will not use the tape right out of the gate, like you might think right at the front of the season. He may wait a while. Or somehow Jimmy could destroy the tape, or there's no guarantee that an old tape recorder will actually work. So there's a lot of outs on this. I think that the most obvious, the one that they will probably not do because they're really good at not doing the obvious, is that Chuck will take this before someone, and even with his voice recorded, saying that he did it, he'll beat it on the grounds that I've stated. That he had said several times in the tape that he was just saying it to make Chuck feel better. And let me just add, Chuck is a bastard. Overall, I like the first season better than this season.
I don't know if I agree with that. It was a pretty good season. It didn't end like on a very like climactic.
They would have been better to end it with last week's episode than this week's episode.
Yeah.
There was actually more tension and drama going into this episode than we went out with. The stakes seemed a little lower this week. I understand that it's Jimmy's law practice, but we all know that he's going to become Saul. Like, the only tension you can create on this show, really and truly, is between characters like Nacho and Chuck and Kim, because you don't know their fate. You know that Jimmy's not going to ever completely lose his license, at least until he goes to Nebraska. So that's kind of like an anticlimactic way to end the season on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts. What grade do you give this episode?
A 90.
Give it an 89. I thought last week was vastly superior. This was still better than over half the episodes this season. I give this season overall an 89.
I'll give it a 96.
The season?
The season.
Wow. The sum was better than the whole, or the whole was better than the sum, or however that goes. He liked the whole thing better than the parts, is what I'm trying to say. All right. Well, that's it for us. I think we're going to take, 42 weeks off?
Yeah.
That's weird. So by the time that we come back, if you go back and watch the first one of these we've done, you'll have aged something like 2.5 years.
Wow.
They need to pick up the pace a little bit.
They do.
Ain't going to kill them to, come back in 26 weeks. I thought it was a little weird that after we got so much Kim this season that she hardly showed up at all this episode.
I didn't really notice that.
And no Howard. I really missed him.
Nah, that's fine.
Didn't miss Howard.
Nope.
Howard had like 3 seconds. No.
He should have had no seconds.
Until next season, when we get that next flashback of Jimmy in Nebraska, thanks for watching. We'll see you next year.